Hi everyone, it's me, Kidlet. It's been a while since I've last posted. I just want to thank all the new subscribers that have gone on since I last posted here. Anyways, I decided that I was going to take on a topic between fan characters versus original characters. To me, a fan character is basically creating a character and putting them into an existing universe, just to have them interact with other characters. Like, say you make a gem and put it into the Steven universe so they can meet the crystal gems and talk with Steven. Or say maybe the Pokemon universe. You create a Pokemon trainer with these great Pokemon and then catch different types of Pokemon and meet Ash, Misty, or Brock and just interact and just have their own adventures, and pretty much you just add more into them. Meanwhile, an original character is basically a character you create of your own imagination and build the world from the ground up, creating his own backstory and creating the universe around it, as well as making its own lore, its own culture, its own, pretty much its own story. You literally are the creator creating this universe to just fit this character or make multiple characters to fit in this one universe. Meanwhile, with an original character, you basically can make up the rules in that particular universe because you are the creator. You decide what goes and what doesn't. Say, if your universe deals with time travel and multiverse, you can pretty much decide what will go and what will not go. However, with a fan character, you have to obey the rules in that universe you place it on. So say if it's a gem character for Steven Universe, you would have them talk about, hey, are they Pink Diamond's Court, Blue Diamond's Court, White Diamond's Court, or a Yellow Diamond's Court? Maybe it's a crystal gem. You'd have to explain how they survived the war, or were they part of the war, or is your story based during the time of the war, or after, or before, or are they in homeworld? So there's a bunch of things that also come upon as similar to the way an original character would go, but you would have to obey the rules of the particular universe it comes from. However, I noticed some fan creators can create their own universes that somehow just work in a way, like say the AU of Ask White Pearl and Steven on Tabas, that the creator has done an amazing job in explaining White Pearl and Steven, who in this case isn't the son of Rose Quartz, however, is the son of White Diamond. And it is a lot more different than you would think of the Steven universe, but in the case of this is an AU or an alternate universe, it works because it still follows the rules of Steven universe, and he still needs the crystal gems, and it's still the way you would want to see how it would work out. I'd highly recommend to read that AU if you ever get the chance. Then there are the fan characters that kind of make you cringe because some are just either too perfect or they just remind you of your 13-year-old edgy self trying to make the most awesomest character that you've ever posted on DeviantArt and put so much edge to it that you'd probably cut yourself with it. Now, I don't see anything wrong with that. It's how we learn when we first create characters. And I would say it's more of a learning experience when you first start out making your first fan character. Take, for example, the character I am coloring in at the moment. His name is Kid. I made him in the Invader Zim fandom almost back in 2011. He is originally supposedly a love child between the characters Zim and Dib. And the way that went was that Zim wanted to create an experiment to take down Dib, which ended up being that he mixed his DNA with Dib's DNA and in turn created this character. Zim doesn't even call this his son, he just calls it the Experiment 1412 Kid. And poor Dib is just confused on the fact that he is now a supposed father, though in the beginning in that story was that Dib was originally going to give it up to science, but then realized, no, this kid is my own child and I gotta take care of it. So then it was just a running gag of Dib being a dad and trying to take care of this tiny little baby Irkin well, half Urkin, because it's half him, half Zim's. And Zim just like trying to deny that it is a child, it is an experiment, it isn't supposed to be a child. I used to draw segments and comic running gags of this because it was just hilarious, but I never posted it on the line because it was just my own running gag. I was just embarrassed to just post that. However, Kid ended up changing a bit back in 2012 when there was this OCT on DeviantArt specifically for the Invader Zim fandom called Bloodsport. In it, was basically, like I said, it's a death match that the tallest makes, and it's pretty much the survival of the fittest. I wanted Kid to enter this after I read a few comics of the previous Bloodsports, because this was the 3rd season of this OCT. However, when I went through the rules, it stated that the character that you put in cannot be related to any of the characters in the Invader Zim fandom. So say if they were related to Zim and Dib, that could not be allowed. They have to have their own backstory. So this what ended up being its first steps of Kid's backstory changing from being a love child and having his own story being made. Kid's first backstory was super edgy because I remember that the way it has it is that he's an orphan hybrid that lived on Foodcordia that used to eat scraps of trash from the bins at the age of 4 and was kidnapped and later sold into Urkin slavery because hybrids are sought after as lower than Urkins and lower than humans, and he was bought by this tallest candidate, which in my universe is potential tallest that will eventually have the role of tallest as the leader of the Urkin Empire. In this case, he was bought by Blue, who pretty much is a little sadist from what I remember writing about him, and he still is to this day because he's still part of the universe that I have him in. Anyways, Kid and Blue sort of developed a sort of master pet scenario, with Kid having Stockholm Syndrome eventually as the years go by. Along the lines, he's also a cannibal because of how much Blue would starve him, and then would feed him carcasses of other aliens that would essentially be enemies of the Empire. And Kid, being so starved, would either eat them, and that was how I had him, as a little cannibal that would just be a sort of bodyguard for Blue. That's how edgy I had him in, and that's how I threw him in Bloodsport. Now, at the start of Bloodsport, Kid's around 14 years old, and my competitors all thought this was both adorable and hilarious because you have this edgy 14-year-old hybrid with wielding a giant spatula fighting against bounty hunters, bodyguards, and serial killers for a death tournament match. And he's there because Master Blue said he had to go there. So eventually I managed to make it up to 4 rounds, and believe me, this Bloodsport ended up being like 3 to 4 years that I ended up being in this tournament, and I lost to my friend Corrupted Mooch, who ended up winning that year of Bloodsport. So since Kid lost Bloodsport, I had it in the story that he somehow managed to survive because Blue went to get him, but because he lost, Blue decided that he was gonna save him and then later get rid of him because he already was announced as the next tallest and no longer needed Kid. Kid at first is heartbroken because he has that Stockholm Syndrome, as I said, because he cares about Blue, but eventually he learns to get over that and then goes back to Foodcordia, where he ends up opening his own restaurant and later raising an orphan of his own. Now that's where I would have stopped. However, because of Bloodsport, I ended up meeting such great friends on that, including my friend Leon, who I later end up having Kid have a love relationship between his character named Risk. Now, because of Risk, I ended up redoing Kid's entire history. He still had that whole session with Blue and Bloodsport. However, now his beginnings were different. He has a mom and a dad, his father being a gun smuggler and his mom being an Urkin scientist who had a one-night stand with his dad. And that's how I had it at the moment. and it still is the same story now that I've made him into an original character. Now, with me having to have made Kid into an original character had to do with the fact that eventually, by the time, maybe a few years ago, I realized I loved the Invaders Zim fandom a lot, but there was pretty much not enough about the universe itself to add more into the lore. Pretty much most of the stuff I've made for Kid was stuff that I had invented out of my own imagination, but still keeping with the same universe within the Invaders Zim fandom. So I ended up having to make a decision and make Kid into his own original character, keeping up with different designs. Here right now I'm coloring and lining art his first, I would say the first design, which I call the alien species of Coex. So basically he's a space fairy. Pretty much I made him more humanoid with some aspects of fairy, but I'll admit that this design was one I used maybe for a year and a half before I changed it up. But basically, I just could no longer do the Invaders Zim fandom. I do love the fandom a lot, but after a while I wanted to make my own ideas. So I ended up having to use some of the ideas I used in Invaders Zim, but how to create its own universe in the new character. He's still the same character, but just with a different design. Now, in this new universe, which I call the Cloververse, Kid's people are known as Coex, and Coex used to live on this planet known as Oron, which ended up being destroyed due to the Coex from long ago ending up using the planet's resources to the point that the planet could no longer sustain life itself. So the Coex ended up having to travel as nomads across the universe trying to find a decent planet to live in. Kid is essentially an experiment made by his mother, because during this time the Coex can no longer have more children with each other. So Kid's mom, who we call Mar, she was trying to find a way if the Coex species could survive using other species' DNA, in which this case was a human that she came across named Matthias. So Kid is pretty much the success of Mar finding out that humans and Coex can mate with each other. However, she also did something else with Kid's DNA, and that was change his gender from female to male, because Coex are mostly almost female with very few little males, and she wanted to make sure that he would be born male. However, the thing is, because of this, he ended up corrupting a certain part of his DNA, which ends up having to later find out when he ends up having his first heat cycle, because Coex go into a heat cycle where they either want to mate, or in this very recessive gene, which is where they end up transforming into the opposite gender and mate. In this case, that's what happens to Kid. He ends up getting the recessive gene to be able to transform into a female and mate with other males. So basically the story still follows how it is in the Is universe, but in this case, Mar ends up giving Kid to Matthias, and Matthias tries his best to raise him. However, Matthias is basically a bad dad, because he already has 2 children from previous marriages he's raising, but he literally has no idea how to raise him. So he pretty much does his best to clothe him and feed him, and try his best to be there for him, but he basically doesn't know how to take care of him. His elder siblings end up taking care of him, which later ends up being the premise on how he got captured by Blue, because in this case, Matthias is still the weapons dealer, and with a sort of deal going wrong, because he ended up stealing a bunch of weapons from Blue's people. So Blue ended up hunting Matthias down, Matthias and his crew managed to escape. However, they didn't realize Kid was pretty much a stowaway on the ship. So when they abandoned ship, they accidentally left Kid there. So when Blue found Kid and realized what kind of species he was, they decided he was going to keep him because he was a rare species that hasn't been seen in a long while, and such a rare species should belong to him. So Kid ends up belonging to Blue, who is a sort of prince to one of the human colonies. And so the premise of how I had him in the Invaders in fandom, where he ends up serving Blue, is still the standard. However, the only difference was that Kid wasn't raised as a cannibal. Instead, he was just raised as a bodyguard, but still a very cute bodyguard, because no one would expect him to be the sort of protector for Blue. Along with this, Kid ended up having a playmate along with this, which is another friend's character named Noah. Both him and Kid were just essentially two cute characters that would bodyguard Blue, and that's how it ends up being right now. So there is more to Kid's story as a Kawek. However, I'm not going to say more since I want to still keep that hidden for when I actually write down this comic for him when it's done. However, as you can see, a fan character can eventually become a original character if you just put more thought into it. Now, I know maybe this isn't how you think a fan character and an original character are, but for me, that's how I see how it is. And maybe you guys have some sort of difference, but that's how I see it. And well, here you can see how much he's changed from Kawek 1.0 to 2.0, because I eventually decided to change the design to look more alien and bug-like, which I'm much more proud of. I would have to thank my friend Fox, because she's the one that helped me with the design, because I originally had him way too human looking, to the point that I was like, yeah, I would rather have him more alien-like, and this is how it was the result. Anyways, that's pretty much all I have for original character versus fan character, and this felt more like I'm just talking about my own character. Anyways, I'm just happy that you guys stuck around and just watched this video, and hopefully next time I'll be able to give you something better to watch. I guess like and subscribe, and if you want more video or content, just comment below, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!